I'd like to welcome to the stage Catherine Cheney, who is the woman behind a lot of the programming these couple of days. So if you like the speakers and topics we have, please thank Catherine and Colum Lynch, and they're going to talk just a little bit about what they're seeing and hearing this week around UNGA.
Thank you, Kate. Hey, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the programming today. So as Kate mentioned, I helped put this program together, but also work very closely with our news team on our broader presence here at UNGA and Climate Week. So how we're going to cover it, how we're going to show up, this event being very much an extension of our journalism, but we have reporters all about town covering this big week. And Colum, of anyone, has a really inside view. He's based here in New York. He's always talking with people within the UN. And in fact, that session you saw earlier that Colum moderated was directly inspired by a story that Colum wrote. So it kind of goes both ways. Our coverage inspires our events and vice versa. Colum, just give us a preview. Hopefully people in this room have been reading you in Newswire, but what are some of the big things you're watching this week?
So, is this on? Hello? Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I tried to do is I knew that there wouldn't be a lot of focus in the general media on the Future Summit and the Global Digital Compact and the Youth Declaration. So I tried to really get into the weeds of that, and it's a little mind-numbing to try and track because it covers every possible issue you'd imagine: security, climate, development, pretty much everything. The role of youth, leadership, international governments, AI, digital. So it's a little difficult to get your brain around it. So the trick to that was trying to figure out, not so much like following the documents as they were negotiated, but to look and see and get your hands on all the amendments behind the scenes that governments would put forward. So you could see early on the negotiations that the Russians were going to be difficult because they had a whole array of issues, from efforts to try and take out language on human rights, gender equality, disarmament. There was one provision in which Russia was trying to change, which seemed pretty simple on the face, that governments shouldn't try to bomb people in heavily populated areas. And so they would use the negotiation in a sort of private way behind the scenes to try and sort of advance their positions. So it wasn't terribly shocking to see the Russians, breaking with the consensus at the end of this. So, you're focusing on things like that, how this is a major reform, the biggest reform effort in a generation by the Secretary General. What does it say about the international community's ability to basically engage in multilateralism, the thing that they've been doing for the last, since the Second World War? And, can they position themselves in a way that reflects the needs and demands of the moment? So your UN Security Council expansion, basically, a product of the Second World War. How do you include, say, African states in permanent seats in the Security Council? Most of these governments were under colonial rule during the founding of the UN. How do we modernize the organization? And this sort of process over the last year, really kind of underscores how difficult it is. All of the sort of advances were fairly marginal. Negotiating this at a period of deep geopolitical friction between the major powers, tension between the global North and the global South over funding issues, over the feeling that the international financial architecture is skewed, biased against developing states. So all of these issues are kind of in the mix, and you're trying to sort of assess, are we really making progress on this? I mean, for example, everybody talked a good game this week about expanding the Security Council involving African states with 2 seats. The Americans don't want to give them a veto, but this negotiation on Security Council's expansion, everybody's known that the council's outdated, that it's problematic, that it undermines its sort of legitimacy, and yet they can't agree. Regional powers try to undermine the efforts of their regional neighbors who maybe want the seat. The permanent members of the Security Council are, not crazy about giving up this enormous privilege that they have. They generally talk a good game that they wanted, but they often are not, really moving the ball forward. The Americans came out with some interesting proposals this week. We'll see if those talks go go anywhere. So that's most of it. And then, of course, you're looking at the, you want to look at, what's President Biden's farewell going to be like. I thought, the thing I thought was the most interesting was this message he sent to all these world leaders that, you all have to know when it's time to go, and that you're not here, to preserve your own power, but to serve your people. And I thought that was a very powerful statement from the most powerful political leader in the world. And that was one of the more positive parts, I think, of the president's statement. There were a lot of criticism of, his diplomacy over Gaza, other parts of the world, inability to negotiate a ceasefire, inability to prevent the spreading of the conflict in the Middle East, and that sort of thing.
So for more of this coverage and analysis, make sure that you're subscribed to our newswire. We also have special edition podcasts of This Week in Global Development here in New York. And Colum mentioned the Summit of the Future and the Global Digital Compact. He'll be interviewing leaders behind both of these big efforts this week, tomorrow afternoon here at our summit. I know another big topic this week is global food security. So without further ado, I want to pass it back over to Kate for a session on that. Please join me in thanking Colum.
Thank you. Thanks.